What's going on, Los Angeles? What is up, and welcome to the Rams Skinny here on the LA Football Network. Excited to be with you. Hope everyone had a great weekend. The Combine is wrapped. I think we had a lot of good Combine coverage over here at the LA Football Network. A lot of it thanks to the guy to my right, Mr. Ryan Skinny T. Anderson. A lot of coverage there. Written form, we did obviously on our 2 podcasts last week, kind of went through some positions and some players to look at. So if you're interested in that, make sure to check out the past 2 episodes from last week. But today we are moving on to free agency. We are 1 week away from the quote unquote legal tampering period launching on Monday, March 11th. Obviously everyone knows the legal tampering period. That really just means they start announcing signings as they're not official until 2 days later, but they pretty much are as official as they can get. So we're going to talk a little bit of quarterbacks. There's been some rumors of some potential, I don't know if you call them vets, but current NFL quarterbacks that the Rams could target to back up Matthew Stafford. We will talk a little bit draft quarterbacks. I know we've touched on it, but a new mock draft has the Rams taking a QB at 19. So we'll kind of discuss that. And then we're going to talk defensive backs. You look at this young secondary, with cornerbacks and safeties, and obviously both Jordan Fuller and John Johnson are going to be free agents, so what the Rams do there. So we'll look at that, and then next week we will cover the remaining positions for free agencies. So a lot to get into throughout this whole week. We'll have lots of coverage on LAFBnetwork.com, but thank you all for hanging out with us. First and foremost, my man, Skinny T. What's up, my brother? How's the weekend? How you doing?
Weekend was good, man. I was doing a little bit of hockey reading before we got on here. I know all of our listeners love when we talk some hockey, but you and I grew up playing the sport. So I was looking into 20 years ago tomorrow. The Senators and the Flyers got into a big brawl that changed how fighting happens in the NHL. But that was, that was a good trip down memory lane. They'd gotten into a kind of a little bit of a scrape a couple of games before this one happened. And then all of a sudden they played again and they dropped the gloves. Just one of those kind of things where even the goalies were getting into it. Yeah. They were just dropping the puck and then dropping the gloves. Fun little memory lane down there.
Love it. Who doesn't love a good hockey fight? I mean, I feel like even like nuns at church are like, yeah, they're down for a good hockey fight. I mean, everyone, you see the most docile, like kind-hearted people all of a sudden tossing their beer at the stadium when a fight breaks out for hockey, just gets the people going. And I feel like, you mentioned that 20 years ago and, the heyday of the 90s when like the enforcer was like a highly touted player in hockey and, usually paid pretty well. Like sometimes the enforcer was a highly paid guy because he was like set the tone, and then it kind of went away for a while. And I feel like it's kind of coming back. I feel like the fights are more frequent than they were like in the last decade. I don't know how much hockey you've been watching lately, but been trying to watch a lot. We're getting to the trade deadline into this week. This will be the last hockey we talk about, but trade deadline into this week. So I've been trying to pay attention, but it seems like fighting's kind of coming back. Have you noticed that at all?
I haven't noticed that, but you've got your finger on the pulse. I'm still trying to figure out who my new favorite team is going to be.
You've been doing that for like a year. Like, who's it going to be? You got to just pick one.
Yeah, I've been leaning Oilers. They've been making this amazing comeback. They obviously got 2 hot young players. So, and I like the Canadians. I like to keep it northbound.
Okay. I respect that, but I feel like if you don't have any lineage, you should go Kings. You live in LA now. Like, pick one hometown team, pick one. I mean, obviously we cover the Rams, but as a true just like fan, why not the Kings?
I always do as the song tells me to do, which is root for the home team. So they're definitely on the radar. But we'll see what happens when we get to the playoffs. Okay. But as I was telling you earlier, I was reading about the hockey, but I was dreaming about football. Yes. I literally had a dream where the NFL draft was happening today, and I had forgotten. And so I got onto my computer and I was looking everything up. And what had happened in my dream is that the Rams had traded up in the draft to number 6. I don't know who they were going after in number 6, but they'd made the trade to get up that high. So I don't know if this is premonition. We'll see what happens, guys. Maybe they're going up for a cornerback. Maybe they're going up for a quarterback. I don't know.
We'll see. I think in your dream, probably Les Snead had, that little Post-it note, and he had written Latu on it no matter what, but then still traded up to 6, took him at 6 when he probably could have gotten him at 19, but we'll see if that happens. Hopefully
We'll
not.
see.
Hopefully not.
You know you're a degenerate when you're dreaming about the draft.
Yeah, it's that time of year, and that's what we do. So it's fun, but free agency comes first, and I love free agency. I think the free agency frenzy, as it's known, it's wild every week. It starts, Monday, and obviously then Wednesday is when the new league year officially starts. But it's fast and fluid, and a lot of things happen. And there's times when, a lot of things the rumors kind of get talked about a lot, and then a lot of those come to fruition. But there's a lot of like stuff you don't see, and it's usually like 10 big names every free agency that everyone kind of has an idea of where they're going. And then after that, it's kind of just, I remember when the Rams signed Allen Robinson 2 years ago, obviously it didn't work out, but that was like, whoa, where did that come from out of left field? And, there's always some of those. So we'll get into those over the next, today and later in the week, because I think there's some good ones on our radar that we could talk about. So before we get into it, I'd like to mention you about our friends at BetOnline. Head to betonline.ag today. Use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. Gets you a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. All the sports right now to bet on, or at least baseball close. We're almost to baseball season. It's always funny. If you're any casual baseball fan, you still love this time of year. Like, spring training, pitchers and catchers report, and then like opening day is great. And then by May, none of us give 2 Fs about baseball. But, it's fun right now because every sport's going on, minus football, but football's year round with free agency. So BetOnline.ag, tell them the guys at the Rams Skinny sent you. All right, when we look at quarterback, obviously, I don't think we need to say this, but we'll just say it anyway. Matthew Stafford is the starting quarterback for your Rams for now and until he decides to retire, or, unless he falls off a cliff, but had a great season last year. I love seeing Skinny going into the season. You and I were one of the few that said, hey, no, this is still a top 10 quarterback. He's certainly top 1, 3 at worst in the NFC. Many people had him in the bottom 15, the bottom 20, the bottom 10 in the NFC. And now, after this season, everywhere almost unanimously has him as a top 10 quarterback once again. So rightfully taking his place as one of the top QBs. So as long as I think he is in that form and wants to keep playing, he will be the starter here, at least through his contract. So this is about the backup. Who's going to be the true backup? Carson Wentz came in. We can talk about him, obviously, but on your radar right now, kind of what's your thoughts that the Rams should do? Let me ask you this first before we even give names. Do you want to see the Rams target someone in free agency or the draft or both? Maybe they do a free agency vet and they draft someone in the mid rounds as kind of a future project. Kind of just what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm leaning toward drafting somebody in later rounds, or getting a guy that can go out there and win you a game, as I like to say. They tried to roll with Rippon last year. He played in the game, and that didn't work out. And then they immediately kind of went out and got Carson Wentz, as you were talking about. Yeah, so I mean, I think you got to get a guy that can confidently go get under center and just kind of get you through a game. And so I think that it's probably a both and situation. Draft somebody later on and pick up somebody. And there's some really great names in this free agent class for the quarterback position specifically that aren't necessarily going to be bank buster kind of guys, but have significant playing time, and they've proven to be able to win games. You've got Tyrod Taylor out there. You've got Baker Mayfield out there, Gardner Minshew, Teddy Bridgewater, Joe Flacco. These are all guys that are legitimate grown-up quarterbacks that can play the game, that we've seen can handle themselves out there. And I think that's what you want. I think that's what you want out there. Now, when we get into the draft portion of it, that's a more interesting question. But you really got to ask yourself, what is the Rams window right now? And not just at quarterback. Matthew Stafford turns 37 in a couple of days, actually, just in 2 or 3 days, I think. And that's kind of when we've seen some other quarterbacks, drop off. We've seen Matt Ryan and Ryan Tannehill and Peyton Manning and Phillip Rivers all he might actually still be able to throw a ball around. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that was his fault at the end there, but where the arm just stops working. But you're looking at the window. It's not just Stafford. It's Sean McVay. It's Aaron Donald. It's Cooper Kupp. All of these guys have a shelf life, and if you're pushing towards this last window for these guys, drafting a guy in the first round or second round, I think is just a wasted pick, because you can use that guy to propel this team into the window where they can win a Super Bowl. They can win another Super Bowl.
Yeah. We'll get to the draft in a minute, but I'll just say this. I wouldn't necessarily throw things at the TV if they go QB in the first, but I would not agree with it and would not like it. And I know there's some contingency that points like the Packers. Well, look, they've had a franchise quarterback now for 30 plus years going blah, 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 blah. They've also only won one Super Bowl, or I guess two, if you count the one Brett Favre Super Bowl, the one Aaron Rodgers Super Bowl. So it's not like when they were seeing that window close and getting, Jordan Love might be the next great quarterback, but that doesn't guarantee Super Bowls. And I think a lot of people, us included, do you get one more Super Bowl in this run? And maybe you have a couple down years at quarterback once Stafford retires? Or do you say, oh, well, we'll waste our run right now, but hey, we'll have a good successor once Stafford does decide to tie it up. But guess what? We're also losing Donald, Kupp, everyone else you mentioned. So we're kind of restarting anyway. So I don't think it's the right time to do, maybe next year if they have another high first round pick somehow, like maybe that's the year, depending how this year goes. But this year specifically, I think it'd be much wiser. I still think draft someone later. We'll talk about that, but not that first round pick for a quarterback. When you look at these free agents now, and this is now what we can get into, Skinny T, about who we actually like, because you mentioned some names there. The ones that intrigue me for true backups, and this is more cost. The Rams right now, as it sit, have about 41 million in cap space, and so you don't want to. I think it's wise to spend some of that for a backup. As you mentioned, you don't want to have the Brett Rippon situation where, God forbid, something happens to Stafford, you're just at a loss. But, obviously a guy like Baker is commanding 30 to 35 million as a starter. So that's kind of out of the question. What is a Jameis Winston going to cost? Kind of a top end backup. That might be a little bit out of their price range in terms of what they're trying to do roster wise. But I think someone like a Tyrod Taylor is intriguing just because, 35 years old, been around the league. He can probably come in and win you some games if you need to. And I don't think he's going to cost a whole lot of money. Someone like a Sam Darnold. I know hasn't had a lot of success, but still only 27 years old. Obviously from LA, played at USC. Maybe that's a chance that he can kind of come in here and back up Stafford, be with a good organization. Drew Lock, hasn't had a ton of success, but, won some games last year with Seattle and had to come in. Still 28 years old. You can probably get him for cheap as well. The last one I'll toss out here. Well, two more. I would say potentially a Mason Rudolph, 29 years old. It doesn't move the needle for me for a backup. I mean, he's a serviceable backup. And then lastly, I think this is my favorite is just bring Carson Wentz back. A guy that came in that last week, has now been with the team for a little bit. And I think gives you upside of talent, arm talent, and size and all that stuff. But again, unless that one game put enough tape where some teams like, hey, this guy can maybe start for us, I don't think he's going to command a ton of money. But maybe more than, a Sam Darnold would. So who are the truly some guys that you would be like, I want this guy as a backup. I think this is a lot of upside for the Rams. And maybe even, not to get too optimistic, but maybe even a guy that, hey, if they're 27, 28, 29, 2 years from now, 3 years now, maybe they take over starting. And it gives the Rams draft, even push that farther down the line. So I don't know. Who are you liking out of this?
Are you talking Minshew Mania in LA? Is that what's going to happen?
Yeah. Okay. I didn't mention Minshew Mania because I think he's going to cost a lot more. I think he'll get some starting looks. A team like, Denver has no money. Now they officially released Russell Wilson, but they have just no money to give a vet. But I think he basically gave the Colts a chance at the playoffs, even after losing Anthony Richardson. So to me, even his backup price is going to be 10 million plus, in my opinion. And I think he'll get some looks at potentially starting. That's the only reason. Otherwise, he'd probably be my number one candidate.
Yeah, and it's so hard to gauge the quarterback market. I like Tyrod Taylor a lot there. Another name I'd throw in there is Tyler Huntley. He's kind of a Bryce Perkins on steroids kind of a guy. Obviously, he hasn't proven that he can go in there and win the game, but he's got some interesting talent that he can bring to the table. I like Carson Wentz, and the question is has he paid or has he played himself into a contract where he's competing for a starting role or pushing a younger quarterback? I keep thinking about a team like Carolina Panthers for him or something like that.
Mm-hmm. That's a good spot.
Of the list, I think we've named all the guys. I think, we've got an article on the site right now mentioning that maybe a Zach Wilson trade is kind of in the works, something like that.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on that? So I'll just ask you first. What's your thoughts on Zach Wilson? He's obviously still young. We know the arm talent. He just has been abysmal with the Jets. But what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and
I didn't even mention him.
The question is, why has he been so bad? Is he just a bad quarterback, or has it just been a bad situation? And over the last few years, it's just been a bad situation for him there. And before the coaching changes there, it was an even worse situation. So there's some intrigue there. I've never really liked his game, so it doesn't get me excited. But we've seen guys revitalize their career. I mean, Baker's a perfect example. I mean, not a perfect example because he had some success. He was in a bad situation, but he had some success there. And so, maybe he finds a nice landing spot here in LA and a little bit better situation and learns a thing or two from Matthew Stafford. It doesn't excite me though.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, the interesting, and we have the article, like you said, up on LAFB Network, so everyone can check that out. But it was Jeremy Fowler that suggested it from ESPN that the Rams are an intriguing option to pursue, and it would be a trade. He's not even a free agent, so a trade for him. What's interesting, correct me if I'm wrong, but to my knowledge, like Mike LaFleur, Rams OC, and Zach Wilson had like a falling out in New York. Like it did not end well between the two of them. And so that to me makes no sense. I feel like Michael would be like, nope, I want nothing to do with Zach Wilson. So
they're going Mike White over Zach Wilson when he was the OC there. So
yeah,
I mean,
unless they've mended things, and obviously Sean McVay is kind of the big cure-all, the big band-aid for everything. But yeah, if he was a free agent, I'd be like, yeah, why not? He's young, former, second overall pick, similar to Carson Wentz. Like, why not? But to trade any kind of asset, even if it's a 7th rounder, like with the guys out there available, I see no reason to do it unless you truly believe he's a guy that at his age you can fix him and he can be a franchise guy when Stafford retires. I mean, who knows? I mean, maybe McVay thinks that, hey, this is a guy that he'll be. How old is Zach Wilson? What do you think? 25, 24?
Yeah, something like that.
He was pretty young coming out. He did go to BYU, which usually they're a lot older, but I think he was fairly young. But unless he thinks like, oh, here's a guy I can trade a 7th for, and 2 years from now, Stafford's got 3 years on his deal, 2 to 3 years, maybe we can groom him and he's like the guy at, 28, 29 years old. I think that's a long shot, but maybe that's what Jeremy Fowler's thinking.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Like I said, I've never been a fan of the game. I didn't think he was going to be a good quarterback coming out. And I'm rarely right. So I'll take this one as a win.
Yes.
But just kind of pivoting towards the draft, the two names.
Sorry to cut you off. Just he is only 24, so he would be 26, 27. So the age is a good factor there. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Pivoting towards the draft, there's been a couple of names that have been dropped as possible 19th draft picks for the Rams. You're looking at JJ McCarthy maybe at that range. You're looking at Bo Nix maybe in that range. Do you think either one of those guys could be a potential future quarterback for the Rams?
So JJ McCarthy, I mean, all indications from the combine is all of a sudden he may be now QB3 in this draft. There's people slitting him at 3rd overall pick. There's been chatter that Sean Payton and the Broncos love him. So even if he fell to 12, he would not make it past 12. The Broncos may be interested in moving up. The Raiders have interest, the Vikings. So McCarthy, I feel like it seems like based on chatter is a lock to go top 10. Whatever team it is, we'll see, but a lock to go top 10. Now, Bo Nix, and then the other name that I would throw out there is Michael Penix Jr., I think could absolutely be available at 19. There's a shot that could be available in the 2nd. Either guy, I'm not a big Bo Nix guy. I would prefer Michael Penix Jr. over Bo Nix. I still wouldn't take either at 19, just because I think they have other things that they could get at 19 that would give them, great talent right now that would help aid into a Super Bowl run right now, which this team is in. Now, like I said at the top of the show, like I think middle rounds is great, but if a Michael Penix Jr. falls the second round, that would be tempting to me. If he's there at whatever pick, what are the Rams, like 39 or something in the second, something like that,
I
or
think it's later than that. I think we're in
whatever they are at. Oh, not 39.
52.
Jeez, that would yeah. Thank you, 52.
They're getting the Chargers at 37, I think.
Yeah, must have. But if Penix somehow falls to 52, I'd be into that. I think that would be a worthwhile, because the Rams have drafted very well in those third, fourth, fifths where they could make up for it. They have 11 overall picks. Michael Penix, a lot of people have talked about his injury history, if they feel good about that. But I mean, he's got, great arm talent. I think he fits very well in Sean McVay's system. People talk about his age. He's 24, so same age as Zach Wilson, ironically enough. But, still, if he sits 3 years, only 27, you figure if he can play till he's 37, 10 years, that's a plenty nice shelf life for a QB in this league. So, yeah, if he falls in the second, I'd be all for it, but I wouldn't want to take either of those guys in the first. How do you feel?
Yeah, I'm really out on anybody in the first at this point. I don't think you're going to find a generational talent there. You can point to other examples. Lamar Jackson going in at the last pick in his draft class in the first round anyway. But there, and it just gets it gets really murky. And what I've seen from those two guys, I just don't get excited about it. So I think it would be a wasted pick to go that high with a quarterback. I'm looking at third round. I'm looking at a guy like a Spencer Rattler. Take a chance on him in the third round.
Yeah.
The guy from Tennessee, Milton, throwing 70-yard passes at the combine. That's got to get you a little bit excited in the third, fourth round, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm thinking, and people may be a little bit sour because the Stetson Bennett thing didn't work out. He was a third round pick last year. Not football related necessarily, but nonetheless it didn't end up working out for their backup position. I don't think they were ever really thinking of him as a successor to Matthew Stafford. But I think you got to look at, when you're looking at draft picks that late, you just got to look at upside, and those two guys I think have tremendous upside.
Yeah, I think number one, and it seems like for me his biggest red flag was personality when you date back to his younger years, in
Rattler,
high school. Yeah, Rattler, and then going to Oklahoma. But it seems like, as he's aged and matured, that's worked itself out at South Carolina. But the upside, I mean, is tremendous there. If you're able to get him in the third, fourth, or fifth round, I mean, this was a guy when recruited out of high school by Lincoln Riley was the next great prospect. And had he stayed with Lincoln Riley, may have been, but obviously then we know Caleb Williams comes in and takes over his job, and the rest is history. But I mean, the upside is there. The problem with him is consistency. He'll make some throws that look amazing, and then he'll overthrow guys or make poor decisions. So if he's able to come in and not have to start right away and be in a good organization, a healthy organization with the Rams, a great head coach in McVay and what they've built here, and they, the coaching staff, he's a guy that I think could potentially be the face of this team, 2-3 years down the line. I think that's a huge upside. I'd feel almost as good with him than I would with a Bo Nix in the first or second. I like Michael Penix better, but I think, there's a lot of upside there. Is there downside? Yes, there's definitely a lower floor with Spencer Rattler than other QBs, but you're willing to take that risk if you're taking him in the fourth round. If you're taking him in the first round, then that's a risk you better not be taking. But in the fourth round, so be it. You get some bad chatter in the Facebook groups like they do with Stetson Bennett, but that's about all you get, and you kind of move on. The other one, before we move on to DBs, I really like out of Tulane, Michael Pratt. He's an experienced guy. We saw some really good offenses for him. He's a 4-year starter. So, breadth of experience there. Good arm talent, has some mobility. So another guy I think could be that third, fourth, fifth. that you take a shot on, and a guy that has a lot of experience from college, and coming from a smaller school in Tulane. But hey, they've been in some New Year's Six games. They beat USC in the Cotton Bowl on a great comeback. Tajay Spears was the star of that game, the running back, but Michael Pratt was no slouch either and brought that team back down 14 to win the game. So Michael Pratt would be another name I'd look for. I know some people have thrown out, Sam Hartman, 7th rounder. Why not? Golden Domer for you, Skinny T. I don't think that's a bad thing. I wouldn't take him before the 7th round, but he's definitely kind of NFL ready in terms of like system he played in, and played for like 25 years in college. So he's up there in age. So he's another guy. If they wait till the 7th round, why not?
Yeah, and I was thinking of another 7th rounder, and you'll have a better read on this guy, but Slovis, former USC quarterback. Also, I'd probably an old man. He's been around for 5 years, it seems like. Bunch of different schools. He's been in every.
SC,
I think he's been in every
BYU.
Yeah. He played at Pitt for a while too.
Yeah, from SC, he went to Pitt for a year and then finished at BYU.
His rookie or his freshman season, I think it's his freshman season, he threw for over 3,500 yards and 20 touchdowns, and then just never was able to find that kind of juice again. But at the combine, he looked like an athlete out there, leading the way as a quarterback. I think he ran under 4.6, 40, some good numbers there. So, that's another guy. Just kind of keep an eye on him, where he ends up in the draft, and maybe he turns into something. Maybe he finds that freshman year specialness once again.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good shout, and he's coached by Kurt Warner in high school, being from Arizona. Oh. So that was his coach. So there's some pedigree there, and some ties with the greatest show on turf. And Kurt Warner, when he was at SC, spoke very highly of him. So, another guy to watch. I mean, a lot of experience playing in 3 different organizations, dealt with a lot of turmoil, dealt with a lot of, situations that, maybe prepared him for the NFL. So yeah, another guy, why not take a flyer on in that 6th or 7th round, that can give you something and have kind of a lower ceiling, lower floor kind of thing, but more maybe stability. So I like that. So there you go. Let us know what you guys think. Any vets you like out there? Is Carson Wentz your top pick for backup? Do you want to see a Zach Wilson trade? I think are we on the same page? I think they should add a vet and also draft someone at some point.
Yeah, I like that. You got to test it out. You got to see, take that bet, see what happens. Nothing wrong with that.
And especially if it's a mid-round pick, you're pretty confident that you can keep him on your practice squad if you don't want to keep 3 QBs on the roster. And with the new rule, you're allowed 3 QBs on the game day roster, but one doesn't have to officially take a roster spot. It's like a practice squad QB, emergency QB, or whatever they call it. So there's a little more wiggle room there to have more QBs on the roster. So yeah, I think we both agree. You got to sign one as your true backup and then go draft one as well to be potentially the QB of the future, or at least a fun project to see what you can get out of them, see how the ceiling is. Moving forward, defensive backs. A lot of questions here. Very youthful group. Some big name, or not big, or big name for the Rams free agents. When you look at the safety room with Jordan Fuller and John Johnson. So just give me your thoughts overall on this group before we kind of dive into maybe some players they could go after in free agency. We won't talk too much draft for DBs yet. We'll wait a little bit on that. We're talking mainly just free agency, but just give me your overall thoughts on this group and kind of what your expectations are for the Rams as they head into free agency in a week.
Yeah, I think, I'm thinking of 2 different things here. So, what's the relationship between the pass rush and the defensive backfield? So where they are with the pass rush right now, they do need to add one more, but they're in a pretty good spot with where they are with Byron Young and Kobie Turner, 2 guys heading into their second year. And then you, of course, have Aaron Donald, one of the greatest player to play at his position of all time, a great pass rusher, obviously. So they're not actually in a terrible spot. So they don't, where you want to allocate your money, I feel like, is in the back end. Yeah. I feel like they should draft at 19 a cornerback, and then also go find somebody and spend a significant amount of money. Now, how significant do you want to go? I mean, Jalen Johnson is out there, had a great rookie contract seasons. There with Chicago or the Giants. Mm-hmm. He was Chicago. Sorry. Adoree
Yes,
Jackson. That was the other guy. He's the Giants.
yes.
Where
I was going to get to. So good teaser there.
Yeah. So those are guys kind of at the top of the list for everybody. So that could be a good place to invest money. So
let's start with this.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. When you look at the current who will be free agents, you got it on the back end. You got both John Johnson and Jordan Fuller, and then at corners you got Akhello Witherspoon or Duke Shelley. So of those four, who and if all, but who do you want to see retained by the Rams of those four?
I'd love to see Jordan Fuller come back. I think of between he and Johnson, I think he had the better year.
Mm-hmm.
I think John Johnson had kind of an up and down year. So that's where I want to go. I think that Akhello Witherspoon, again, kind of had a uneven year. I think he started off good, but then once they figured out that, you just need one athlete to kind of beat him deep down the field, he was kind of a liability. Duke, I'm good with Duke. Bring him back.
You're probably pretty cheap. Yeah. Why not?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think Jordan Fuller, to me, is, not if we're looking at must re-signs, I think Kevin Dotson's kind of in that category. But I would put Jordan Fuller pretty close. He's been the green dot before for this defense. He's been a vocal leader for this defense. When you figure losing a guy like Raheem Morris as your DC, like, you do want to have some continuity at every level with this defense and not totally change. So you have that obviously on the defensive front. You have that at linebacker with Ernest Jones. And so you want that on the back end. And obviously you have some youth back there. But I think Jordan Fuller's kind of been the staple since coming in. This will be going into his 5th season after, 4 years and his rookie contract expiring. So, yeah, I love to see that. I love John Johnson. I think he was a great vocal leader. But, yeah, if the price isn't right, I think they feel really good about both Russ Yeast and Quentin Lake, who kind of can play the other safety position. I know Quentin Lake played a little more nickel this year and kind of moved all over, to be honest. But I think they feel good about Russ Yeast and kind of if Jordan Fuller's kind of the main staple there. And I agree. I think Akhello Witherspoon, again, if they can get him back for cheap, I think he's just serviceable enough. He had a really fine year here in LA, but it's not something they need to go spend money for when you look at kind of the list of who they got. So I would say, yeah, get Fuller back. It's going to cost probably a decent amount. Let's see. I wonder if Spotrac has his market. Do you have a guess of what his market would be, Jordan Fuller?
I mean, he's not one of the flashiest guys out there, so I can't imagine that.
He's not a household name.
Yeah, for sure. I think, he's going to be appreciated a lot more. I mean, you look at, the changes that we're going through on the defensive side, and it's like, what exactly does Chris Shula like? That we don't know yet. What kind of, defense is he going to run? We don't know that. Mm-hmm. We know that, Staley really likes a guy like Jordan Fuller, but he's long gone.
Yeah.
And we know that the Rams have not paid safeties a second contract whatsoever, whether that's Taylor Rapp or John Johnson in his first stint.
Yeah, exactly. And they brought him back on the cheap. So I don't believe Spotrac has a market value for him. I'm going to guess based on kind of where he stands. I feel like within the safety landscape and based on kind of the numbers, I'm going to guess he's going to be in that kind of $4 to $5 million average per year, which for the Rams, I think is worth, offering in that realm, whether it's like, a 3-year, $15 million deal kind of thing. I could get behind that.
Over the cap gives him a valuation of just about $6.5 million.
Okay.
So that's a big jump.
Off. But yeah. But yeah, you're looking at, 3 years, 15 million or 3 years, 22 million. So over the life of it, you do have a little bit more. In that 5 to 6 range, I think is fair. Like, would you give him 6 or do you think that's too rich?
I mean, I like him a lot. I don't see it. I just don't see the Rams pulling the trigger on this one, unfortunately. They've had great success drafting these guys. I think they're going to try to roll the dice again there. I don't know if they go, there's been news that John Johnson has been targeted, that they've been in talks with him, and maybe he's the cheaper one out of the two because, it's, the market will tell us exactly what he's worth, but I think he probably flew under the radar a little bit more than Jordan Fuller.
Yeah, I agree. And there's another name I'll throw out there, Micah Hyde from Buffalo, much older, a little longer than Tooth, 33, I think. But Spotrac has his market value at like 3.7 million per year, and he's got some experience on that back end and has had some good years. Now, obviously, he's on the back end of it. I would probably take Jordan Fuller at 5 over that, but if Jordan Fuller's out there hoping to get 8, 9, 10, then you can bring a Micah Hyde in that add him to that youthful room, and then you add some experience there.
Well, here's a name blast from the past. What about Terrell Burgess coming back?
Yeah. See, he was one I never understood, Skinny. I loved him coming out of Utah, 3rd round pick. Him and Jordan Fuller, both rookies that year. He was 3rd. Jordan Fuller was 6th. It seemed like Brandon Staley had some love for him. Like he was getting some playing time, got a little banged up. So then he, missed some time. And then the next year in comes Raheem Morris, and he just never saw the light of day. And it wasn't like I don't think it was like he did anything off the field that the coach didn't like him, but for whatever reason, just didn't fit within what Raheem Morris wanted to do or what. I didn't get it because I thought he was a very good player that had a ton of talent.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same way. So, it'll be interesting to see. This is where we're going to learn more about what Shula likes and where kind of what camp Shula was more in, on a guy like this. Taylor Rapp also, again, free agent this year.
Yeah, I don't think many Rams fans are dying for him to come back.
I see the upside of these guys a lot more than other people seem to do. That's just my personality, I guess.
I'm with you.
I think Derion Kendrick was one of the vocal leaders of this defense, and I love the style that he played with. Flaws, certainly.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you have to know what you're getting, right? Like if you expect Derion Kendrick to be, the lockdown, Darrelle Revis Island, like you're never going to get that, and you're going to get frustrated. If you expect like, hey, this guy's going to make some bonehead plays, but he's also going to make some pretty spectacular plays, then you take the good with the bad. So it's going to have to be that you have to set that expectation what it's going to be.
Yeah. And so news coming out today, speaking of cornerbacks, L'Jarius Sneed is going to be tagged by the Chiefs. So there is a tag trade scenario that's been kind of bandied about out there in the media, including by us. Go read our piece about that. It came out a long time ago. We were talking about that a long time ago, but that's another interesting scenario where he's set to be a free agent, but is tagged. But he's another guy that's going to be that's going to end up costing somewhere in that $20 million range.
Yeah. Definitely a scenario to look at. Obviously, the tremendous year he had with the Chiefs, Super Bowl winning corner, lockdown corner for them. I think it was like I'm trying to remember the stat, but it was like from week 5 to the rest of the season, like didn't give up a single second half touchdown or something like that. Like It was something I need to look up what exactly it is, but it was a pretty wild, like speaking of lockdown corners, like that was pretty dang locked down. So intriguing how does that feel too rich for you? Like 20 million for a corner? I mean, that's going back to like, you better be getting Jalen Ramsey type production if you're garnering that kind of money.
Yeah, and potentially that he's the kind of guy that offer that. And like I was saying at the top of this conversation, is that's where I think they need to invest the money in, because I feel very good about the base that they've got going on. I do think they need to add another pass rusher. I'm not in the Brian Burns camp. I'm not in the Josh Allen camp. I'm more in my guy's Andrew Van Ginkel, you got to invest in that position. But you think about Leonard Floyd. They won a Super Bowl with Leonard Floyd. Obviously, you bring in Von Miller, so there's some calculus you got to do in there. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to get Aaron Donald home. You're not trying to be you're not trying to get Nick Bosa. You're trying to get Van Ginkel. You're trying to get a guy that's going to get 10 sacks. I think they're 10 sacks away from going deep into a playoff run.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So all that to say is they've got $40 million of cap space. You're going to save about 10 of that for the rookie class coming in from the draft. they value the cornerback position. They paid Jalen Ramsey like $40 million over his years. So I think that I would feel good, going after one of these top end guys there, and then finding a cheaper edge rusher.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think of the exact contract, but it was like a 4-year, $80-something million deal for Ramsey. It was 20 plus average per year. So they clearly value that if they believe the player enough. It's always tough, giving that contract when the guy hasn't played it down for you. So, getting a L'Jarius Sneed and then having to sign him to that big payday before ever playing it down in LA. But if they obviously seen enough from the Super Bowl winning season and how much he meant to that team, and they feel like he's a good fit, I kind of trust their judgment in that term, because that's one of the positions they have actually, done fairly well on in terms of trading. They've moved on quickly. They traded for, if you remember, Aqib Talib and Marcus Peters a while back, but they got good production out of him, and then they just moved on quickly, and then obviously brought in Jalen Ramsey, Akhello Witherspoon, great production out of what they got out of him and what the expectations were. So another position. The last one I want to say, and we mentioned it loosely, what's your thoughts on Adoree Jackson, though? Like, I'd love to see him back in LA. Obviously, a USC legend here. Anytime you can get a USC guy back or any LA guy back, I think it's great. I looked, Spotrac has him market value around that 11.3 million per season. So about half the cost of a L'Jarius Sneed. Still only 28 years old. So you figure you have at least one really good contract left, and then kind of corners start to take your downhill, at that 32 or so. A little bit, maybe even before that, but you've got 2 or 3 really potentially productive years, and he's not, a top 5 corner, but for that 10 to 11 million range, I think he's a guy that not only provides you with a very solid starter, guy with some veteran experience, but also a guy potentially that you can use in special teams. Obviously a great special teamer, not only in college, but in the pros. So it gives you some versatility there as well. So what's your thoughts on the old Adoree Jackson?
Yeah, I like that, because, going back all the way to the beginning of the conversation about quarterbacks, even, we're looking at a 2-3 year window that they're trying to win another Super Bowl in. So he fits in that. I mean, even at his age, he fits into that time frame. It kind of just depends on how long of a contract he wants. Like you're saying, he's kind of reaching the tipping point, and this is going to be probably the last contract that he can really cash in on. So if he could very easily get priced out of that $11 million, the market can really push that up, I feel like. But, it's also his last chance to get on a Super Bowl winning team or a Super Bowl contending team. So that might be something that attracts him to this defense. So I think, because he fits in that window, I think he's had some, he's had good years, even up until now. So definitely a fan of that one.
Yeah, so that'd be probably my top choice. Just to throw some other names out before we wrap up here. I mean, it's a pretty deep corner class in free agency. You look at, we kind of mentioned about Kendall Fuller with Washington, still 29 years old. You look at Michael Davis with the Chargers just across town, had kind of one really good year of his 3-year contract, but there obviously we know the ebbs and flows of the Chargers. So he's 29 years old and could bring some not familiarity, but he just stays here in town. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson with the Lions, up and down again, but another guy with talent. Emmanuel Mosley, another guy with talent. Jeff Okudah, former 3rd overall pick out of Ohio State. CJ Henderson, another top end 1st round pick. And lastly, I'll mention Rock Ya-Sin, who had some success in Baltimore after his first stint. I believe he was with Carolina before going to Baltimore. So, in terms of name recognition, there's certainly some good guys to get in this free agency class. Again, it just depends how much you're willing to spend versus, what kind of production and the expectation is going to be for these guys. So we shall see. It's going to be certainly fascinating, but I would be shocked if they don't sign at least one of these defensive backs. I'm not saying one of these we mentioned, but don't sign at least one defensive back in free agency.
Yeah. And it's been really interesting because the Rams haven't generally been big players in free agency. But this is the first time they've ever had a little bit of money in their pocket, a little bit of walking around money. But it's not a ton. So they kind of have to pick and choose their spots. You can't get a Brian Burns and an Adoree Jackson. You got to pick one or the other, and I think, it's I'm leaning a little bit more emphasis on the defensive backfield, just because they've just leaned so heavily on youth and development and draft. get a veteran back in there and really raise the boat there.
Yeah, I agree. And there was, what was it? I was going to say, so literally when you look at the cap space right now, allocating about 151 million to offense and only 57 million to defense. And of that 57, obviously a large chunk is to one player, the one Aaron Donald. So they're going to have to spend some on defense to keep up as a competitive unit. And they tried it. You really think about it. I'm trying to think back outside of getting like Andrew Whitworth that one year, but they really haven't spent a lot on offense in free agency outside of the try for Allen Robinson. And obviously that was a big swing and a miss. So I think they'll stick with kind of development draft guys and then, really focus on defense in this free agency class. And we'll talk about the other positions, but, corner/safety is certainly going to be one of those.
Yeah, and Kevin Dotson might be the odd man out when we're talking about allocating funds, because he's going to cost, as you've mentioned a couple of times on the pod, he's going to cost a pretty penny.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but that will do it for today's episode of Rams Skinny. Thank you all for hanging out with us and following us here on the LA Football Network. We'll be back later in the week for plenty more free agency coverage, and obviously all next week. I have a feeling we're going to be doing some live shows, Skinny T, with any breaking news that occurs, especially if there's some big names that end up here in LA. So thank you all, as always, for the support. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Rams LAFB YouTube page if you have not already. We certainly could use the support and appreciate it. And head over to LAFBnetwork.com for all of our Rams coverage. For Ryan Skinny T. Anderson, I'm Ryan Dyrud. Be well, be blessed. Talk to you all in a couple days.